What does it really mean to be rich? And more importantly, why do some of the wealthiest people you will ever meet look like they are barely getting by? There is a quiet revolution happening in personal finance, and it has nothing to do with cryptocurrency, real estate hacks, or the latest trading app. It is a psychological playbook called stealth wealth, and the people who master it are not just richer than their neighbors, they are freer. Let us start with a contradiction that you have probably felt yourself. You walk past a house in your city. It is large, maybe 6,000 square feet, with a perfect lawn, a German sedan in the driveway, and a family posting vacation photos from a resort you cannot pronounce. And you think, they must be doing very well. But then you meet someone else. They drive a 15-year-old Honda. They live in a modest 3-bedroom home in a middle-class neighborhood. They wear plain clothes and carry a coffee from home in a scratched thermos. And quietly, behind the scenes, that person has a brokerage account worth $2 million, a paid-off house, and the ability to walk away from any job at any moment. Which one is really rich? Sociologists have a name for the first group. They call them conspicuous consumers. The term comes from Thorstein Veblen, an economist who wrote a book in 1899 called The Theory of the Leisure Class. Veblen observed that wealthy people have always used visible spending to signal their status. A gold watch, a silk dress, a mansion on the hill. These were not just purchases. They were social announcements. They said, I have so much money that I can burn some of it on things I do not need, just to prove that I can. Veblen called this conspicuous consumption, and it is still the dominant script in modern culture. But here is the twist. Veblen also noted that this signal works only if other people recognize the value of what you bought. If nobody knows that your handbag costs $5,000, the signal is dead. And that is precisely what the stealth wealthy have figured out. They are playing a different game entirely. Instead of spending money to signal status to strangers, they keep their money and signal nothing. To the outside world, they look unremarkable. And that is exactly the point. Because the moment you stop trying to prove your wealth through spending, something remarkable happens to your finances. Let us walk through the math of that choice, because the numbers are where this story really lands. Imagine a person with an annual income of $100,000 after taxes. That is a solid professional salary in most parts of the United States. Now, imagine two different spending strategies. The first person, call her the conspicuous spender, spends 85% of her income. That leaves 15% for savings and investments. The second person, the stealth wealth adherent, lives on 65% and saves 35%. The difference in lifestyle between spending 85% of $100,000 and 65% of $100,000 is real. The stealth saver eats out less, drives an older car, probably lives in a smaller home. But here is what that difference adds up to over time. Watch the two savings rates build. If the conspicuous spender invests $15,000 per year at an average annual return of 8%, after 20 years, she has accumulated roughly $740,000. That is a respectable nest egg. But the stealth saver, investing $35,000 per year at the same 8% return, after the same 20 years has nearly $1,700,000. More than double. And the gap only widens with time. After 30 years, the conspicuous spender has about $1.8 million. The stealth saver has nearly $4.3 million. Same income, same investment returns. The only difference is the percentage of income that got spent versus saved. And the entire mechanism rests on a psychological decision, the willingness to look ordinary while you become extraordinary. Now, let us go deeper into the psychology, because the numbers alone do not explain why so many people choose the conspicuous path. And make no mistake, it is a choice. It is not about income level. Plenty of people earning $300,000 a year have less than $10,000 in savings, while people earning $50,000 have built real wealth. The difference is psychological, not mathematical. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called the hedonic treadmill. When you buy something new, your happiness spikes briefly. That sleek new phone, that upgraded car, that renovation of the kitchen. For a few weeks, you feel a lift, but then your brain adapts. The new object becomes the new normal, and before long, you need something newer to get the same emotional hit. The treadmill keeps turning, and you never actually get anywhere. You are running at full speed, burning money for fuel, and staying in exactly the same emotional position. Meanwhile, the stealth wealthy person has stepped off the treadmill entirely. They have realized that the happiness from buying a $30,000 car is almost identical to the happiness from buying a $70,000 car once the first month has passed. The marginal happiness from the extra $40,000 is tiny, but the marginal financial impact of keeping that $40,000 invested for 20 years is enormous. That $40,000, compounded at 8%, becomes roughly $186,000 over 2 decades. So the choice is not really between a $30,000 car and a $70,000 car. It is between a $30,000 car now and $186,000 of future freedom later. Let us work through that trade-off step by step, because this is the kind of calculation that separates the stealth wealthy from everyone else. Start with $40,000. That is the difference between the practical car and the status car. If you invest that $40,000 in a broad market index fund earning an average of 8% per year, here is what happens. After 1 year, you have $43,200. After 5 years, you have $58,700. After 10 years, you have $86,300. After 15 years, you have $126,900. After 20 years, you have $186,400. That is not just a car upgrade. That is a down payment on a house. That is a year of early retirement. That is the ability to say no to a job you hate. And all you had to do was drive a perfectly functional car that nobody at the office was impressed by. Now, of course, the stealth saver does not make this choice just once. They make it hundreds of times, across every category of spending. The smaller house, the fewer restaurant meals, the vacation that is a road trip instead of a flight to Europe. Each individual decision seems small. But the cumulative effect, layered over decades of compounding, is the difference between retiring at 65 with Social Security as your primary income and retiring at 50 with a paid-off house and a portfolio that generates $40,000 per year in passive income. The stealth wealthy are not depriving themselves. They are making a conscious trade. They exchange visible status today for invisible freedom tomorrow. But there is another layer to this psychology that is even more interesting. It has to do with the social pressure to signal. Humans are deeply social animals. We evolved in small tribes where our status in the group determined our access to resources, our safety, and even our chances of reproduction. That evolutionary wiring does not go away just because we now live in cities and swipe credit cards. When you see your neighbor pull up in a new SUV, your brain registers a threat to your social standing. The ancient part of you thinks, they are climbing the hierarchy, and if I do not keep up, I might fall behind. That feeling is real and it is powerful, but it is also a trap. The stealth wealthy have trained themselves to recognize this feeling without acting on it. They understand that the neighbor's new SUV is not a sign of wealth. It is a sign of spending. And the neighbor, for all the visible flashing of prosperity, is likely deeply leveraged. The average new car loan in the United States is over $40,000, with a monthly payment approaching $700, lasting more than 6 years. The person driving that expensive car might have a negative net worth. They are not rich, they just look rich. And looking rich is a completely different thing from being rich. This is where the concept of the wealth signal inversion becomes useful. In standard conspicuous consumption, the signal is the purchase itself. The more expensive the object, the higher the implied status. But in stealth wealth, the signal is inverted. The absence of spending becomes a quiet signal to those who know what to look for. If you meet someone who drives a 10-year-old Toyota, lives in a house well below what they could afford, and never mentions their investments, there is a decent chance they are wealthy. Not because of what they own, but because of what they do not feel the need to prove. Let us now shift to a second mechanism that reinforces the stealth wealth mindset. It is the relationship between status spending and financial fragility. When you tie your identity to visible consumption, you lock yourself into a spending floor. You cannot easily downsize your lifestyle without publicly admitting that your financial situation has changed. The house, the car, the private school tuition, the club memberships, these become fixed costs that you must maintain to preserve your social image. And that means you lose flexibility. If you lose your job, you cannot simply cut your lifestyle by 40% without everyone noticing. You are trapped. But the stealth wealthy person has no such trap. Their lifestyle is modest enough that a job loss, while still stressful, is not a social catastrophe. They can cut spending without embarrassment because nobody was watching their spending in the first place. There is a wonderful irony at the heart of stealth wealth. The people who spend the most on status are often the least financially secure, and the people who spend the least on status are often the most financially secure. The visible rich are often fragile. The invisible rich are resilient. And resilience, in the end, is what real wealth is actually about. It is not about how much you can spend. It is about how long you can survive without earning another dollar. Now, let us look at a contrasting example to make this concrete. Consider two people, both 50 years old, both earning $150,000 per year. Person A has spent their entire career in conspicuous mode. They live in a house worth $800,000 with a mortgage of $500,000. They lease 2 luxury cars for a combined $1,200 per month. They take 2 international vacations per year, put their children in private school, and have built a visible life that their friends and colleagues admire. They have $150,000 in a retirement account and about $20,000 in emergency savings. Person B has spent the same 30 years in stealth mode. They live in a house worth $400,000 with a mortgage of $100,000. They drive a single paid-off car worth $15,000. They take 1 modest vacation per year, send their children to public school, and have never cared about impressing anyone with their possessions. They have $800,000 in retirement accounts and $150,000 in taxable investments. Both people earn the same salary. But person A is a single medical emergency or job loss away from financial collapse. Person B could endure a multi-year period of unemployment without changing their lifestyle at all. Who is really wealthy here? This contrast also reveals something about the emotional experience of money. Person A, despite all the visible signs of success, is likely anxious. They are one missed paycheck away from defaulting on their image. They feel the pressure of maintaining the facade. Person B feels something very different. They feel secure. They feel free. They know that they could walk into their boss's office tomorrow and quit, and life would continue essentially unchanged for at least a couple of years. That feeling, the feeling of not needing anything from anyone, is the real luxury that money can buy. And you cannot get it from a car or a watch. You can only get it from a balance sheet. So why does conspicuous consumption persist if it is so obviously inferior as a strategy? The answer lies in a psychological phenomenon known as present bias. Humans are wired to prefer rewards now over rewards later. $1 of status today feels more real than $2 of freedom 10 years from now. The brain's limbic system, which processes immediate rewards, is much louder than the prefrontal cortex, which handles long-term planning. Conspicuous consumption exploits this wiring perfectly. It gives you a dopamine hit right now. You drive the car off the lot and your brain releases pleasure chemicals. Stealth wealth offers no such immediate hit. The reward of saving $35,000 this year is entirely invisible. There is no ceremony, no admiration, no social validation. You just have a number in a database that is slightly larger than it was before. It takes a special kind of person to prefer that. And the stealth wealthy have learned to train themselves to feel that invisible growth as its own kind of reward. Some of them use mental accounting tricks. They watch their portfolio statements the way others watch a sports score. They gamify the savings rate. They track their progress toward financial independence with the same enthusiasm that a fitness enthusiast tracks their body fat percentage. They reframe the act of not spending as an act of winning. Every dollar not spent on status is a dollar that goes to work in the market, earning its own dollars, building an empire of freedom that nobody can see. Let us now build one more calculation, because the cumulative effect of this mindset across an entire lifetime is genuinely staggering. Start with a 25-year-old who earns $60,000 per year. If they live on 50% of their income and invest the other 50%, with their investments growing at 8% per year, and their income growing at 3% per year through raises and promotions, here is where they land. By age 35, they have roughly $330,000. By age 45, they have $1.2 million. By age 55, they have $3.1 million. And by age 65, they have nearly $7 million, all from a starting salary of $60,000, and all while never looking rich to anyone around them. They just quietly did the work, kept their head down, and let compounding do the heavy lifting. Now compare this to the same person if they had lived on 80% of income instead of 50%. The result after 40 years is not 7 million. It is roughly 2.8 million. Same career, same investments, same everything except the spending rate. The difference of 30% of income, every year compounded, creates a gap of over $4 million. That is not a small difference. That is the difference between a comfortable retirement and generational wealth. That is the difference between leaving your children nothing and leaving them $1 million head start. And the only cost was looking ordinary for 40 years. There is one more psychological insight worth exploring, and it is perhaps the most important one of all. Conspicuous consumption is not just expensive, it is a distraction. When you are focused on what other people think of your purchases, you are not focused on what you actually value. The stealth wealthy spend their mental energy on things that matter. They think about time. They think about autonomy. They think about the experiences that actually bring them joy, rather than the experiences that look good on social media. And because they are not constantly chasing status, they have the bandwidth to figure out what they actually want. Many of them discover, once they step off the hedonic treadmill, that they do not actually want very much. The modest house is fine. The old car gets them where they need to go. The home-cooked meal is often better than the restaurant meal. The quiet evening with a book is more restful than the expensive night out. They are not suffering. They are not depriving themselves. They have simply realized that most of what money buys beyond a certain baseline is not actually making them happier. And once you realize that, saving money stops feeling like a sacrifice. It starts feeling like a game you are winning. The practical takeaway from all of this is not that you should live like a miser. It is that you should question every dollar that you spend primarily for the purpose of signaling to other people. Ask yourself, would I still buy this if nobody ever saw it? If the answer is no, that purchase is not for you. It is for your audience, and your audience is not paying for it. You are. Every dollar you spend to manage other people's perception of you is a dollar that cannot be spent on your own freedom. And the people who understand this trade-off, who internalize it deeply, who build their entire financial lives around it, those are the quiet rich. They walk among us, invisible, unremarkable, and completely free. They have mastered the art of being wealthy without having to prove it. And in a world that screams for attention at every turn, their silence is the most powerful statement of all.